Teachers and boards of trustees were welcomed onto the Huiturangi Ora Marae in Hamilton for the start of a 4-day study of the draft Maori Pastoral Care Plan. The course was aimed at an examination of Maori spirituality and the history of the people. Participants were led through the Pastoral Care Plan and later developed strategies for implementing it into their programs.
Tapa nei whakaiakia, hei runga te koti pūhera no te koti hon. Ana kai kona koutou e noho mai na ka mau te longora. Whiti tua, whiti aro. Nani e taraki e tau nei te papa e takato nei. Taluku, paneki, tū mai te tōki. Haumi e, hui e, taiki e. Nā reira ranga tira mā, karanga. Karanga te pō, karanga te ao. Karanga te tihi o ngā puki, karanga te tihi o ngā tāngata. Anei hoki rā rātou kua tau mai nei ki runga tēnei o tātou marae. Me ki, mai te rerenga wairi o te ao pauri ala taira wātu ki a ngai tahuta wai pau namu. Mihi mai ki ngā mātā waka kua tau mai nei ki runga tēnei o tātou marae.
Whakamoi miti, whakawhetai.
In this opening address, Bishop Mariu speaks about Maori spirituality and the significance of the marae.
Kai hautu to waka o hata petra hare mai nei tēnei wā. Nā e pā tēnā koe. Hare mai me ngā taimahatange e rungi tō poku hiwi, ngā mate o ngi a koe. Ngā mate o tū whakatoa. Ngā mate o ngā hau e whā o te motu ngā marae maha. Nā rea ka tēnei te mihi o huitangi o ki a koe. Ka nui ngā mate hoki i ungi o mātu. Nei reino ope hake mai nei. Nā rea ko tēnei hoki te...
Whakarongo au ki te tangi a te manu, he manu tui ei runga, tui ei i raro, tui a te hera tangata ki ti hei Mauri ora. Te whare tūpuna e tū nei, tēnā koe. Te marae wahora, tēnā koe, tēnā kōrua. Ngā mate huhua o te wā, mō ngā hau e whā, haere koutou. Moi atu koutou, i te wāhi ngaro e ki ana te kōrero, te kāinga tūturu mō tātou mō te tangata, haere koutou, e oki e moe. Kua tika rātou ki a rātou, ko tātou te hongaora e pai nei, e pā kōrua ko tauri, ngā mihi kia kōrua, te pai. Ahakoa, te nui o ngā mahi, ko ana te ngāko, ko tau mai ahau kei wainganui a koutou i tēnei wā. Taubi ai, ka mihi au ki te rātaha o tāua, ia te piki kōtuku. Ngā mihi anga, i runga i tēnei tūpuna, a rongonui, mō te awa o hanganui. Ko mō whanganui ai, kei wainganui a koutou, e tako tō ana, nā reira, tēnā koe. a ko ngā hau e whā kua tai mai. Mō tēnei huihuinga, tēnā koutou, kia ora tātou katoa. Ngā reira, e kore tō rawa ngā mihi, e o e rā kutu mea nui, ai, kua tūtuki, wetahi o ngā tikanga o rā tauma. Ngā reira, tēnā koutou, kia ora tātou katoa. I roto i te tahu o te he, o ngā whakawaitanga, ka toro mai te ringa o te ariki,
Te ngaro ko ki te mai rā koe, ngā reira haramai. Ai, haramai runga hoki rā i ngā mihi o tēnei o tāua. Tēnei hoki rā o tātou matua prihi e noho nei. E tika anu hoki rā wāna kōrero. Kai te hoki mai koe ki roto i tēnei o tātou whare, ana kei te hoki mai ki runga i tēnei marae, ana kei te hoki mai ki runga i a koe no.
But there's always a protocol, which protocol is not a thing that is written down, it comes from the heart. It's that when people meet in the Mariu world, they don't meet as person, but as people. And each one represents people. And so when Bishop comes here, we couldn't just let him come in and say, hello Bishop, carry on. We have to welcome him and his people, especially those he has sent into the womb of the earth, we call it Mariu. And so he replied in that same sense too. And Toby then, of course, carried on and referred to all the people that the bishop has recently been to. He welcomed also somebody who came here just recently and last.
I te tīmatanga te kupu, i te atua te kupu, no te atua anō te kupu. I te atua anō tēnei kupu i te tīmatanga, nānanga mea katoa i hanga. Ka hore hoki te tahi mea i kore te hanga e ia o ngā mea i hanga. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And there was nothing created on this earth that was not created by God. There's another phrase I want to use too. Nā ka mea ia kaua e whakatata mai ki konei, we te kina o hu I o waiwai. Ko te wāhi hoki e tū nā koe, he wāhi tapu. I use that particular phrase from Exodus because it sums up in one sense what's supposed to be the topic of my talk tonight. And of course it refers to Moses. When God says to Moses, 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 and Moses replies, here I am. And God says, take off your shoes, you are on sacred ground. You know, the whole topic of the marae and the spiritual dimension. I can't actually define for you the spiritual dimension of a marae because every marae is different. No marae is the same. No marae is supposed to be the same. Every marae has a wairua of its own. In other words, every marae has a spirit of its own. It depends on the people who built the marae. It depends on the people who live around the marae. It depends a lot on the reasons why the marae was built. And there are a whole lot of other things as well. Every now and again, I go home to my mum and dad's. And after a few minutes at home, I normally go out the back door and go and sit on my favourite rock on the side of Lake Taupo. And this rock is just down the back from Mum and Dad's, about from here to the dining hall away. And it's surrounded by hot pools and a lot of cold water. But it's also surrounded by a lot of other things. And I often go down there and sit there and just think. I just let my mind wander. Sometimes my mind goes into the past and I start thinking, trying to picture what home used to be like 100 years ago. Sometimes it goes into the past when I can remember a boat coming around the far end of the far point on the lake when they used to bring the tūpapaku, or the bodies of dead people, home by boat before the road was ever put in. And I go back to those things and begin to think of all my old people. Other times I just sit there and try and project into the future as to what my home village will be like 20 years, 50 years, maybe 100 years from now. And then, of course, what's the use of thinking if you aren't brought back to reality, to what's really happening? And it's when you get into reality, then you start asking yourself questions. Questions like, if this, then what? If that, why not? And if X, Y, Z falls into place, like all good people living in the 20th century and on the dawn of the 21st century, then the question comes up, how much is it going to cost? And all those things, because for me, the lake is a place where I can think. You might think, well, that's a funny way to start talking about the spirituality of a marae. And then, of course, as I travel right throughout the country, not only in this diocese, but throughout the country, I get Catholics who inevitably say to me, Bishop, why aren't our priests like they used to be? And you look at them and you think, now, is that person a Lefebvrist or what? And after a while you start talking to them and they give you all these reasons why they think the priests should be exactly the same as they were 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. And they're people who haven't really come back to reality. They haven't looked at their situation and asked themselves, well, why haven't I changed? Everything else around me can change. Why haven't I changed? And quite often, that's one of the difficulties, the real difficulties that we face in the church today. Spiritual growth demands growth. Spiritual growth does not say that I, Bishop Max Takuira Matthew Mariu, has to be the same in 20 years' time as I am now. If that's the case, then I'm not growing. And so you can say, well, what's that got to do with the spirituality of a marae? And the answer is quite simple. It goes back to what I said at the beginning. I cannot define for you the spirituality of a marae. I'm going to ask you a question, and I'll give you a few seconds to think about your answer. You've been here at Hui Te Rangiora for what, 2 hours now? 3 hours? Can anyone here tell me exactly where the marae is? You just think about it. You've been welcomed officially and according to protocol onto this marae. You've had a meal on this marae. You had mass on this marae. But can anyone here actually tell me where the marae is? I'd even be curious to know if any tangata whenua can actually tell me where the marae of Hui Te Rangiora is. And it's a very important question, and you'll find out soon why it's a very important question. So can anyone in this room tell me exactly where the marae is? Yes?
It's in the centre of Hamilton, about 13 or 14 minutes from the airport, and it's on a street with roadworks up the way from it.
Thank you. Anyone else got any other version?
Just the courtyard in front of this wharesupuna.
True. Aye, kei te tika. You see, The whole complex is not the marae. It is, for convenience sake, in terms of Māoridom in the 20th century, and so that the local council can designate it according to its local plans, it's exactly where you said it is. But in reality, there are a whole lot of parts to this marae. And strictly speaking, the marae proper is that piece of ground out there in the front of this marae, which is probably the most sacred part of this whole marae complex. Now the dining hall and the whare nui and the little chapel and anything else that's on here is part of the marae complex. But they are not the marae. That's not where, if you like, if I go back into the old way of talking, the kaitiaki of this marae resides. Now, a kaitiaki in Catholic terms is the guardian angel. A kaitiaki, according to old Māori terminology, is the abiding spirit that looks after this marae. So that's, the marae is just out the front. See, when I was a child growing up down home, and because I was brought up in a strict marae situation, and I suppose I was one of those, I was always nosy enough to ask. And I used to get hidings for it every now and again, but never mind. I made it my business to know different things about our home marae. And one of the things I found out was the whare nui is not the marae. The dining room is not the marae. It's part of the complex. But the marae is the most sacred part, which is the part immediately in front of the meeting house. So to get back to the topic of the spiritual dimension of a marae, it involves a whole lot of things, a lot of dynamic things. See, a lot of Christian people, including Catholics, think that carvings and tuku panels and kōwhaiwhai are evil. And when you ask them, why do you think it's evil? They say, well, it represents taniwha and all these other things from another world. They see a carving and they look at it and think, oh, isn't it evil? And yet they can go into their churches, look at a statue of St. Joseph, get on their knees and pray to it. They can go and see a painting of St. Francis Xavier immediately behind a tabernacle, get on their knees and kid themselves that they're praying to Jesus Christ. But the moment they come into a marae situation and they see these carvings with tongues darting out here and there and other things protruding out in some, they immediately stand there and say, oh, can't go there, it's evil. And see, what happens is they can't transfer their concept of spirituality to any other reality other than that with which they are familiar. And yet they are serious about evangelization. They are serious about telling people about their faith, because their faith is right. Jesus Christ is the essence of their faith. You take them into the marae and I say to them, that's a carving of St. Peter, that's St. Peter Chanel. The spirituality of a marae, don't equate it with the spirituality of a church. It's similar because the spirituality of every culture has its similarities. Now, with the Māori Pastoral Care Plan, which Father Tate is supposed to be talking to you about later on in the week, that's the basis of our Māori Spiritual Care Plan, our Māori Pastoral Care Plan. The fact that we do have a spirituality. It may not be a spirituality that grew out of the convictions of Christianity, but the similarities are there. And that's what we must build on. So that, for instance, when my great-great-grandfather converted to Catholicism, he found it very easy to accept Catholicism because there was so much in Catholicism that was similar to what he already lived by. For instance, to fast. Before any war party went to battle, they had to fast. They had to cease eating at least 24 hours beforehand. They had to cease all sexual activities. They weren't even allowed to sleep in the same whare as their wives. And so the whole concept of fasting in the Catholic Church was nothing new to the old Māori. Before they opened a house on a given day, they would fast. They weren't allowed to eat food, cooked food, until the designated time. Now, all of that has an effect on the spiritual dimension of a marae, because it's all of those things on which the marae is actually built. Now, as I hinted earlier, it's not for me to tell you the spirituality of this marae. Now, earlier we heard Father Haring and Toby Curtis refer to it as a Catholic marae. Now, I'm one of those, I don't believe there is such a thing as a Catholic marae. It's either a marae or it isn't. It's not a particular denominational marae. Because if it is, then what you're doing is actually trying to import a foreign concept into another culture that doesn't quite equate. I'm not saying that there are certain things about Catholicism which make it impossible for a Catholic community to build their own marae. They've done it in a lot of places. Papua Te Aroha and Tokoroa. Tūngawaka in Auckland. Te Rangi Mariu in Christchurch. But in reality, there is no such thing as a Catholic marae. We can give a marae a Catholic character, like our schools, but it's not a Catholic marae. It's a marae first. So you look around you in this house and you see the kōwhaiwhai and the tuku panels. And if Father Haring had the time to do it, he could actually stand up and explain to you the meaning of each of these tuku panels. What they represent here in the Tainui area doesn't mean they have the same meaning in the Te Arawa area of Rotorua or down in my home people in Taupo. Someone may explain to you a tuku like that one, that big one there, the yellow and white, and someone might say to you, well, that's a potama, that's a stairway to heaven. Someone from somewhere else might say, kei te hekwe. No, you're wrong. That's not the potama. And they could be right, because where they come from, the potama may be slightly different from that. And so, you know, the spirituality, the spiritual dimension of a marae, it's not something that sits on the surface, it's something that's really deep, because it goes to the heart of the Māori person. Now, that's the other essential part about marae. Not the marae itself out there, it's given a name, but the house that you're in now. This isn't, for me, it's okay. For all of us, it's a building. And see, this is where I really, things get on my goat when people start talking about shifting things from A to B and all that. You know, or even when people say, oh, you know, you've got to build a new church in a town or anywhere. And they say, oh, well, we'll pull the old one down and put up a new one. And I think to myself, well, do they really know what they're doing? You see, because in Māoridom, if you pull a house down, what you're actually saying is, I'm no longer satisfied with the spirit of that house, get rid of it. And in terms of, say, European thinking, then, okay, pull it down, put up a new one. If a Māori was to do that, strictly speaking, what he would do is he'd actually go in and talk to the house, to the church. Now, I've seen that done, and I'll tell you, it's awesome. One of my home marae is down in Tūwharetoa on the slopes of Mount Tongariro, a place called Papakai. The old meeting house where it used to be was shifted to this particular site because, well, it had to be shifted because the government wanted where it was so they could dig rocks out. So the home people shifted it, and we called our people together, and this old fellow came from Taumaranui because he was part of us, and he walked into the house and he said it all in Māori, but this is the crux of what he said. After about 10 minutes he got up and said, the kaitiaki of this house is not here. In other words, the guardian of this house isn't in the house. And everyone here started standing on end. People started fidgeting. Any kid who dared ask a question was almost smothered. And he went on for about an hour and a half. And in the end, he was up there. In the end, he went to the far right-hand corner of the house, and he stayed there all night. He didn't sit down, he stood there all night and just talked. But for us, he had to do it in order to give life back to the house. And all of that is part of the spiritual dimension of a marae. Now, for some tribes, you know, when they build a house, they would have asked for a sacrifice. If it was a particular type of house, if it was going to be the senior house of a given tribe, then in some places they used to put the heart of a human being under the pautoko manawa. That's why it's called the pautoko manawa. The heart, the centre of a house. And that's the pautoko manawa. Why? Because the house is a living person. It's not a thing, it's a person. So for instance, if you go into the meeting house in Tokoroa, Papa o Te Aroha, you don't just go into the house, you go in to the heart of a living human being. And that's why we talk to it. We speak to it as a living person. Not a living thing, a living person. If you want to insult a people, you insult their house. Yeah, you got the House of Windsor. For the same reason. It's not just a name. It represents something that's deep. If you want to insult the royal family, you insult the House of Windsor. If you want to insult the people who belong here to this marae, then you insult this house. And all of that is part of the spiritual dimension of a marae. I'll give you a good example. There was a debate somewhere last year, and it was very serious. And a certain group of people were asked to leave the room. And these people stood up and said, "How dare you? What right have you got to tell us to get off our marae?" And with that, an elderly woman got up and said, "Excuse me, this isn't a marae. It's never been a marae, and probably will never be a marae." They were in fact in a library. But you see, they assumed that because they were in a building that was associated with a place that is often referred to as a marae, and okay, they owned it, they thought they were on their marae. And so, as I say, just because someone says, that's a marae, don't take for granted that it is a marae. You know, we've got into the habit of, when we welcome people to Mass in different places, we say, "No mahara mai ki tēnei marae." Strictly speaking, that's not true. I don't know of any church, Catholic church in this country, that has been designated a marae. Now, for convenience sake, we can say, "No mahara mai ki tēnei marae," just to be nice. But strictly speaking, no church is a marae. You can use a marae as a church. You can use a church to serve the purposes of a marae at a given time for a given purpose. Like, for instance, just for argument's sake, if someone of some importance here in Hamilton died, and we decided that we're going to take his or her body to the cathedral in Hamilton and use the cathedral for a marae, for that particular purpose, we can say, sort of, that it's a marae, but that's for a very particular purpose. That doesn't mean to say it is actually a marae. Now, there are a whole lot of ramifications with all of that, and it means that what we've got to do is actually begin to understand what a marae really is. And you see, for me, there are a whole lot of things about a marae. When I come into that, when I step into the porch of the house, of this particular meeting house, I'm stepping into the head of the human being. I come into the door, in the doorway, and I am in the heart of the house. And everything about me, because it is a person, is sacred. It is tapu, not in the sense of you can't touch it, but it is tapu in the sense that ko te mea nui I roto I tēnei ao, he tangata. The most precious thing on this earth is, just for the sake of being bowled over, man. Man not in the sense of the male, but man in the sense of it is a human person. It's the most precious thing on this earth. And for that reason, we as Māori tell our people that our meeting houses are people. Now, you know, in the back block areas of the country, you can drive around and probably see old meeting houses and paddocks. And you can begin to think, well, why was it left there? Why is it just going to waste? And the reason is, it's a human being. And unless you've got very good reason for shifting it, you don't just pick it up and shift it somewhere else. You let it die a natural death. But at the same time, we still refer to that spot as a wāhi tapu, as a sacred place. Why? Because at a given time in history, our people lived there. That was them. Any questions? Don't be shy to ask.
Is there, but you know, to some people, the inside of the wharenui is a woman.
Yeah.
Ka kura te tangata, ka puta mai te tangata, te kōpū te wahine.
Aye.
I don't know if that's in every marae. It's just
What she's saying is that to some tribes and some peoples, the inside of the actual building, or the inside of the wharenui, is a woman. And so when you enter into some houses, you are actually entering the very womb of a human person, the very womb of the mother, the very womb of the tribe. Now the whole concept of kohanga reo, the language nest, comes from that. The marae as the kohanga, as the nest in which the language and everything that is precious to a people is nurtured. That may not necessarily apply, once again, to every tribe. And as you probably guessed by now, it's dangerous to assume that because one tribe does one thing, then the same thing applies with every other tribe.
Just coming back to the woman being the meeting house, I don't know if it happens here, but is the meeting house named after a male or a woman? Now, I'm actually, Bishop, getting quite confused.
It's easy, isn't it? Yeah.
The wharenui is usually named after the male ancestor, but then to come inside and hear it being spoken of as entering into into a woman, I'm not quite...
Yeah. No, yeah.
I can see it
yeah.
as being a symbolic action. You would see it as a living thing. I see it as a symbolism, like the marae. In the past, the old people lived out there, but today they are welcomed on through the paipai and greeted, and that to me is marae, or community, the sanctity of it.
Yeah, you're talking about two things. What you're talking about is the concept being lived. There is a concept, and then there is the actual living out of that concept. You've got a concept of marae, which entails that spot there, or that particular complex there, is referred to as the marae. And when people come on to the marae, and they meet onto the marae, you're actually living out the fulfillment of what the marae stands for. Right. Now, when the topic of the inside of a meeting house being the womb of a woman, you remember I said that does not necessarily apply to every tribe, because there are differences. Yeah. And in a lot of cases, well, you know, you just take Tūranga Wairau. Mahinarangi is a woman. There are a lot of meeting houses.
Sorry, isn't that womb, you know, the timatanga o the tangata? I don't think wahine.
Yeah.
Ka tai ka puta mai ki wapu.
Yeah. And we refer to it as te whare tangata. In other words, the womb of a woman is where human life begins. And so, in strict Māori term, we refer to it as te whare tangata, the house of the human person. So this is where a lot of people, when they don't understand the word that's been used, tangata has a multiple meaning. In the given context, it could mean, I can say, ko te tangata e tū rā, and point to a male, and say, and it means in that case the man standing there. I can quite equally say, well, te tangata e tū rā. I haven't specified whether it's male or female, because the concept tangata refers to male and female, depending how you use it. But with a marae situation, most maraes, if you know the name of a house and who it's named after, then that's what you go by. But also it points to the importance of knowing local tikanga, local custom, local tradition, where, you know, as we said, the inside of one house may be referred to as te kōpū o te wahine or te whare tangata, the womb of a woman. In another area, they don't use that concept.
Thank you. Thank you, Bishop.
Any other questions or queries? Sorry.
I've got some queries, Bishop. You mentioned something about no church has been designated a marae, something in that term.
I know I leave myself open for that one, yeah.
Okay. I was of the impression that Huitarangi or that more a meeting house, I've never been there, I'm not Huitarangi, Unawaka. I was under the impression that was a marae, or that not, they're a different concept altogether. I've never been there.
Tūranga Waka is a marae, but the whare karakia, while it's part of the complex, is, you know, like this place, is separate from the hall, and it's all built under one roof, if you like. But as you go into Tūngawaka, then the wharekarakia is on the right, and you go into the hall of Wharenui, which is on the left.
We've got a situation down at Tūhono,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that.
Mm.
If this has been the case, there is nothing, you know, in the church that's designated as a marae. That's going to change. Are we going to rectify that?
It may not need rectifying. Eh? I think what we have to be careful of is how we designate things and the reasons why we do it. You know, the whole, one of the things that I really abhor is naming something just for the convenience of being able to use it like that. So that you get people saying, you know, referring to their churches as a marae. Yeah. If we're going to be Māori tūturu, then let's be Māori as Māori. Not as Māori trying to use our things for convenience sake. You know, it's what pāhenare gets around. For pāhenare, and he'll probably talk about it on Tuesday, there are two things, pono and tika. Pono is something you believe in your heart. Tika is putting that what you believe into action. And it's a bit like that. Eh? If a marae is a marae, it's a marae. Now, at our home maraes, if you may book a marae for a wedding, a 21st or whatever, a 50th birthday. As soon as someone dies who's got to come back to the marae, that particular function is cancelled automatically. We say to the family, sorry, mate takes precedence over everything. Even if you've had it booked for the last 10 years, a mate in our home maraes will always take precedence. Why? Because you are fulfilling the real reason why you have your marae. Hey. Ka hoki mai ngā mate, hei takoto. All our dead come back to lie there. They reclaim their tūranga waiwai. They reclaim their roots. Now, in a lot of our urban situations, you get huge problems with it. You get difficulties with it. Okay, it's easy if you've got another venue that you can book easily. And so some houses have no carvings. And so it's all important. So when the topic of the spiritual dimension of a marae comes up, don't look at it in a narrow point of view. It's all-embracing, it's far-reaching, but it is deep. It's deep. Any other questions? Yes.
Bishop, you distinguish very clearly between the true marae, the sacred piece of ground just in front of the Wharenui, and also the marae complex. And then you said that no, there's no such thing as a Catholic marae. Now, were you referring specifically to the piece of sacred ground, or were you referring to the marae complex, or the whole thing, when you said there can't be such a thing as a Catholic marae?
The whole thing. Simply because if it is a marae, it's a marae. It's nothing else. You know, it's like saying you're going to build a church and then you put a swimming pool in it and call it something else at the same time. You know, the marae is the marae, so let's treat it as a marae. Now, your reverence for the marae, your respect for the marae gives it the possibility to serve as a church or whatever you need to use it for. A marae is a very flexible thing.
I can see that.
It has to be, because there are many functions that it has to fulfill. Its main function is to actually look after people. You know, in some of our maraes, the most sacred part, there are people buried there. And they don't, you know, in the old days, in some areas, they were buried there without others knowing who they are. So only the people who buried them there knew who they were. For the sole reason that someone might find out who they are and come and abuse them. So they're there, but they're nameless. In our home marae, there's an old lady buried not far from the front door. Now, we know who she is, but you'll never hear it said on the marae who she is. They don't, in a lot of cases, unless it's for a very good reason, they won't even refer to her. But she's there. Now, if they're going to shift that marae, they're going to have to shift her. And then you've got problems. Because she is part of the guardianship of the whole marae. Not just the marae that's there, that given peace. That's the marae atea, that front piece immediately out in front of the meeting house. That's referred to as the marae atea, A-T-E-A. In other words, it's the most sacred spot on that marae. Any other questions? Yes.
Kia ora, Palm. Just the concern that given that we can accept the spirituality of the marae, my concern is probably is the integration of the Māori Catholic spirituality. The way you presented it is actually there are two separate entities. We accept this one, we accept that one. And I'm thinking of the Māori Catholic marae that we actually do have around and are quite acceptable. But do I detect that actually, I know there's actually concern that there actually is conflict in those two.
No, there can be conflict. And the danger is that people start referring to it as Catholic, as marae. And then you start getting conflicts because people start thinking, well, what is it? Is it one or is it the other? Now, it's a bit like our Māori pastoral care plan. And the whole debate in some areas as to whether, in fact, in our Māori schools, the special character is solely Catholic. Right. And I'm saying no. Because when I look in the mirror, what I see is one human being who is Catholic and Māori. Or, to put it the way I prefer it, is Māori and Catholic. When I look in the mirror, the Catholic side doesn't hop out and say, now, shift over because I want to see myself too. It is the one person. Now, how you make a marae Catholic? How do you make a marae Catholic? And it comes back to the whole reason I'm a Catholic. I believe that Jesus Christ, for me, completes what Maui and Tāwhaki and all those other tupuna could not complete. Maui was so cheeky, he decided that he was going to find the secret of life. So while Hine Nui Te Pō was asleep, he decided, now's my chance. I'll crawl into that womb and find the essence of life. And if I find it, I will be eternal. Because we all know what happened. The fantail had a good laugh. She crossed her legs and that was Maui. Which Jesus Christ says, he died on the cross and he rose again. For me, that's the completion of what Maui could not find. And it's not so much a physical resurrection as a knowledge that, ko tahi tonu te hiringa I kake ai tāne ki tiki tiki orangi. Ko te hiringa I te mahara ka kita ia I reira te kanohi o io matua te kore. I aia te toi uru tapu, te toi ururangi, te toi uru ora. There was only one reason why Tāwhaki climbed to the heights of the heavens. It was in the knowledge that there he would behold the face of Io, the faceless, who is the source of all regal might and power. And that's what Christ did. Tāwhaki didn't find the face of Io. He went up there and came back with different bags of knowledge, different kete of knowledge. Okay, and so that aspect of it is important. So no, there's a dichotomy if you want it to be there. The point is, A marae must be one human being. And it's how we give, how we bring the soul of the marae alive that makes it Catholic or whatever. So if we're going to treat Huitarangi Ora as a Catholic marae, then it's up to us, up to the Catholic people, Māori people here in Kirikiriroa, to bring the Catholicity of this marae out into the open. Now, that's evangelisation in Māori terms. And that's what we've always got to guard against. That's why we have to be absolutely sure we know what we're talking about from our Māori perspective to make it a living thing for others to see. And there are a lot of examples around that we can actually point to and say, there it is in action. There are a lot of examples historically that we can point to and say, there it is in action. Or there it was in action. But it's not a matter of going back and saying, okay, let's bring that back. We can bring the Wairua back. Okay, 100 years ago there would have been a, what do they call those old houses? Wharakauta or something. Now, when my say, if that was still the situation today, when my dad dies, they would have brought him back there. They wouldn't have taken him to the marae 200 yards down the road, because his marae was his house. Now, not everyone had their own homes, so they had the communal one, where they shared everything. And that's where the concept of the marae grew out of. And so today, in a sense, we've restricted our concept of marae. But that's the other danger, in that everyone assumes that every marae 100 years ago was like every marae that we see today. And that's not true. And this is the last thing I'll say to you. We had the Lions, what's the other outfit? Rotary. We had Rotary. Because I'm an honorary member of Rotary in Tokoroa, one night at a meeting they said to me, hey Bishop, some of us have never been to the marae. Can you organise it for us to come to the marae at Papua Te Aroha at Tokoroa? I said, yeah, that's no problem. So the next marae committee meeting I said to them, oh look, Rotary want to know if they can hold one of their meetings down here. And I said, but what they want to do is learn something about the marae. Everyone said, yeah, no problem. So we organised it and we brought them down to the marae. And our kaumata from the marae got up and one of the things he said was, he says, you know, when I grew up as a child, he says, there were two things. There was the marae and there was the pā. Now, some spell pā, P-A, some spell it P-A-H. And he said, when you come down here, you come to the pā, then you come on to the marae. And that's very true. In other words, this whole complex is a pā. It's not a marae. And you're going to say, but that's contradicted everything you've said later. The whole complex is the pā. The marae is that piece out there. So when I was a kid at home, we'd get up, if there was anything down the marae, I'd say, oh, Dad, you going to the pā today? And he'll say, yep. And then he'd go down to the pā. Now, that doesn't specify where he's going to be. He could be in the dining room, he could be up in the wharenui, or he could be sitting on the marae itself. And what we've done is we've got very lazy in our use of our terminology. So people have the habit of saying, I'm going to the marae. So the pā, P-A or P-A-H, and marae are part of the same thing, but they're two different things. To evangelise a culture then, we must start evangelising the people who have produced it. Evangelization is not really possible unless the gospel responds to people's profound desires, and the proclamation takes on the concepts and cultural values which belong to them and do not contradict the gospel. Further on in the same document he says, to strive ever anew to know and respect the cultural soul of this people, their language and their traditions, their virtues and their values, which are characterized by the quality of their relations with one another and with God. And one of the other quotes I've got here, two other quotes is, it is evident that if people are concerned about culture, they find themselves at the crossroads of several elements in society which should interest all Christians. First of all is education. People still do not have equal access to knowledge. From the elimination of illiteracy to higher education and to scientific research, it is essential to understand well people's needs and to encourage cooperation that will allow each person to develop his talents, to use the natural resources of his land wisely, to support his family through work, to contribute to the welfare of his country, to live and share his faith. And it comes back to the interaction between culture and the economy. And this is one of the ones I like. Africa remained Africa. It remained Angola. Within this identity, it remained Christian. And if we go back to John Paul's address at the Auckland Domain in 1986, as you rightly treasure your culture, let the gospel of Christ penetrate and permeate it, confirming your sense of identity as a unique part of God's household. It is as Māori that the Lord calls you. It is as Māori that you belong to the church, the one body of Christ. Now, all those, I think, say a lot. Those last few quotes say a lot to us. It's a mission statement. The plan promotes the development of Māori spirituality and culture as essential for the development of Catholic life among the Māori people in a way that is deeply Māori and truly Catholic. Now, they're both, there's no distinction. If you are serious about being Catholic with my people, then you must be serious about them being Māori. If you're serious about them being Māori, then your Catholicity must come to the fore as well.